COVID relief bill. So, let's get started. So, first, I just wanted to clear up some misconceptions that a lot of people are. Actually, what the hell am I doing? Today, I'm filming with Jack F in the upper left-hand corner. Do you just want to say what kind of like what you believe real quick or anything like that?
Sure, sure. So I would say I'm a social democrat, very progressive, both economically, socially. Um, and I do still think that uh, politics should be a cooperative act. It shouldn't just be one side simply trying their very best to make the other side fail. There's a lot more to it than that. And if anything is ever going to get done, it is important to work with those on both sides.
All right, and we have Sam Fedez in the upper right-hand corner. If you just want to like give a brief description of what you believe.
Um, I'm Sam. I'm basically just your average Joe, really. I'm pretty centered in almost every aspect. I don't really take sides. It just depends on the situation, I guess. So, you know, I guess, well, not even anymore, but I'm just a representation of somebody who's kind of just in the middle, who just observes politics, I guess.
All right, as I was saying earlier, we are talking about the COVID relief bill. So, if we want to get on top of that, I would like to clear up some misconceptions that a lot of people have had, and that I personally have had experience with and believed for a little bit before I looked into it myself. So, to begin with, lots of people have this idea that the COVID relief bill is this $900 billion, and we're sending stuff to Ukraine, we're sending stuff to China, we're spending billions on the military, uh, all this other stuff, and the reality is this is actually two separate packages in one bill. This is our COVID relief package, which is $900 billion, and that entire 900 billion is all going directly to COVID relief. Everything being used in that package is COVID relief stuff. Now, on that same piece of paper, on the same bill, we also have our Omnibus package, and that's going to be the federal spending for the year. That is $1.4 trillion of federal spending, and that's kind of talking about what our country is going to be spending our money on in 2021. So uh, just under half of that is going to military. There's actually a fairly small amount going to foreign aid. It's really not that much. I think it's like 10 or 20 billion at most out of 1.4 trillion. It's a very very small percentage of the money going to foreign aid. I think a lot of news media were overblown that, and a lot of it's actually going to some other funding that we'll get into in a bit. It's very interesting and I think very beneficial personally. Um, so yeah, I just want to clear that up. It is just generally a misconceived to be all this stuff on the COVID bill. And one person I saw commenting on the last podcast that it was asking, this bill was over 5,000 pages long. Is that normal? And I'm not sure how normal it is for the omnibus bill to be that long. I did look into how long these bills have been in years prior, and the 2018 bill was like 2,600 pages long. So these omnibus bills are very long, and I could definitely see why it would be 5,000 pages in our current kind of times, where things might need to be more specifically addressed. And obviously, it's also being paired with that COVID relief bill. So part of that 5,000 pages is the COVID relief package. So just basically, our government isn't spending billions offshore and billions on the military in our COVID relief package. That is separate from the omnibus package, but they're both on the same piece of paper and they're both getting passed at the same time. So I think that's where the confusions come from, and I just wanted to clear that up right off the bat because I've heard a lot of people talk about it, and a lot of people get mad about a complete misconception. So if you guys have any thoughts on that, go for it. If not, we can continue.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
all right, go
I,
on.
um, I think even if we were looking at it as a COVID relief bill purely, I do still think that some of the things that were passed with it were perhaps quite overhyped. In particular, the foreign aid aspect of the bill. really was not as major aspect of it as a lot of people were making it. And even if it was just part of a COVID bill instead of a spending bill, I still do think it would be important to, uh, if not give, maybe the same amount that we've been giving in past years, we still should be putting some money towards foreign aid due to the fact that this is a global pandemic and will affect the global economy as a whole.
Yeah, I think a lot of like some of the things people are freaking out over were some of the smaller things. Like we were sending 2 billion out of 1.4 trillion to I believe it was Ukraine for gender studies, and I definitely think there is an argument there where like why are we sending that money there? Why is that on the bill? We should be spending on other things that are happening in the U.S. Like there are several national issues happening in the United States right now that aren't receiving any funding, and it is kind of silly in my opinion that we are sending money to some other countries for stuff like that. Obviously, the foreign aid going out to help other countries get through the pandemic, I think, is justified. And again, we aren't spending like even a fucking percentage point of our federal income and federal budget on that foreign aid. It's a very small amount right now, so I'm pretty okay with the amount we're doing, and I would be okay with actually more foreign aid in the future because it is important to kind of stabilize the world economy in this situation. We do have kind of a position where we're not necessarily responsible, but I think it would be very good for us to invest into the world economy for a little bit.
Mm,
So, all right, are we good to get into specifics in the bill, or does anyone else want to touch on the general stuff?
I think specifics would be better.
All right, so I did a decent bit of research before this, and I made a Google Doc with just pretty much all the different things we're spending money on. So, might be a bit boring, but I'd like to go down these things one by one, and I think it'd be really interesting to kind of talk about the amount of money we're putting into certain things and kind of the implications it might have for the future, and comparing it to years prior to see if it's like a reasonable amount of money to be spending, and if there is unnecessary outrage happening over some of the spending that's happening on this bill. So, let's start with the COVID package, I think, because that's more relevant to the conversation. So, right now on the COVID relief package, the one thing everybody is familiar with is the $600 checks going out to people. I believe currently we've actually sent out the first wave of those bills. A lot of banks are keeping them as kind of like a pending transaction for a few days, but as far as we know, that money has been pretty much sent out, and millions of Americans are receiving their $600 already. Obviously, in the Senate right now, Mitch McConnell is vetoing, or not vetoing, he is
He's
prevent.
not holding a vote on the bill
Yeah, he's
on the $2,000 checks.
yeah, he's preventing the vote from happening, and hopefully that vote will actually go through, and we can see what certain politicians in the Senate and House do think about that. But again, only time will tell for that. So right now we have that $600 for everybody, and out of that $900 billion total COVID package, it's taking about 20% of the funding. So a pretty large amount of that funding is going just to everybody. And the way that $600 is being distributed is it's going to be 600 for everybody who makes less than $75,000 a year. Every person aged 18 or older, or I think it's every non-dependent. So if you are not dependent on anybody and you're under 18, I believe you also do qualify for the $600. So anyone who's a non-dependent who makes less than $75,000 a year will be getting a $600 check as long as you are recognized by the government and you've signed up for it, which is pretty easy. Just you go online to the government website and you can just sign up for it. So the vast majority of people, everyone, pretty much like 98, 99% of the population will be getting this money. Anyone who gets between 75 and $87,000 per year, those people are going to be getting checks still, but it's going to be a much smaller amount of money. I'm not sure on the exact amount, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's anywhere between $300 to $100 per person. If that, it might be even less. And then anybody who makes more than $87,000 per year will get no money at all. And one of the big issues that McConnell in the Senate is pushing right now is that he doesn't want these checks going to the wrong people. And I think that although people arguably making more than 50,000, even less than that, don't necessarily need the money. I think that this is preventing, the really really rich people who don't need the money at all from getting it. So we do have that backup in place already. But the COVID relief bill isn't just that $600. It's actually feeding into a bunch of other programs that are very very interesting. So uh, one of the biggies is going to be the enhanced unemployment funding will be continued. So that's $300 a week for everybody on our COVID unemployment right now, and I believe they extended it for it's I think 7 or 12 months, one of those two numbers. So a considerable amount of time they're extending that relief and that unemployment to just keep people above the poverty line in our country. Um, that I believe costs about a couple hundred billion. That's the vast majority of our, not the vast majority, but a very large part of our relief bill is going into the unemployment funding right now. We also have 25 billion going to help families who are struggling to pay their rent, and 13 billion going to food stamps and other services. All those things are all for just individuals in this country. Um, Nothing to do with like corporations, nothing to do with anything else. So the vast majority of our bill, I believe it's over half of the that COVID relief bill is going to individuals who are struggling and really do need the money. So even just there, we are already way above the threshold that people are saying, 600 billion going to military is just inaccurate. That's on the other package on the same bill. So next we have the actually, why don't we talk about some of that stuff? So let's start with like the $600. How reasonable is $600 to actually keep people afloat with our crippling economy? Do we think that's enough? Do we think it's more than enough? What are you guys' thoughts?
Um, I think realistically, I don't really think. I mean, I might be wrong. I don't really think anybody thinks $600 is enough. Um, I think that the $300 a week is a great idea, but just like a one lump sum thing of $600, I don't think is really enough to sustain almost every person in America. Like, it's not realistic.
Yeah. So, Jack, if you have a yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Looking at the last checks people got months ago to now, that period of time cannot be made up for $600. And especially looking at what other countries are doing for their citizens, some countries are giving way more money to their citizens. Sometimes even completely funding their paychecks, and not to mention many of these countries already have strong social welfare programs. And so it begs the question of why can't the richest country in on the planet do the same for its citizens? And uh, you can of course get into the specifics of that, but this amount of money is just not acceptable for uh, what the American people have really gone through and what they really are needing at this point.
Mm-hmm. So the way I'm kind of looking at it is, I think that this $600 is kind of exactly what it's saying it is. I think the 600 is more of a stimulus for the economy more than actually there to intended to help people live and get by. I think that uh, things like the unemployment program are there to help people get by, because 300 a week obviously is something that you can live off of, whereas $600 in 7 months is obviously something you can't live off of. So I think the $600 is more meant to just go out to everybody, because although a lot of Americans have lost their jobs, we actually do have a program for that. That's the unemployment program that is continuing its funding. And the $600 is more to just go out to everybody who has a job or doesn't, so that they can stimulate the economy and make sure it isn't collapsing, at least at the same speed it would be otherwise. So I do think that $600 is probably a bit low, as most people have been living paycheck to paycheck during these times, and we definitely could do with more money, which is why I'm hoping the $2,000 bill will be passed, or at least voted on at some point in the Senate. But I do think that people who are claiming $600 is, like barely enough to live on, they're correct, but that's not the intention of this. I think that's the intention of things like the unemployment funding and the 25 billion to go to the rent, 13 billion in food stamps, that kind of stuff. That's intended to keep people alive and well, whereas the 600 is there to stimulate the economy. It's a stimulus check. It's there for a different reason.
How much of the money is for the stimulus versus the enhanced unemployment funding? Do you know?
I'm not completely certain. I can check real quick. All right. Hang on. If you guys want to continue talking about, let's see. So we have the small business portion of the COVID relief, which is going to be 284 billion for paycheck protection for small businesses, and part of that is also going to loans for small businesses to ensure that they can keep themselves open and running during these times. It's about, I believe, like 20 to 30% of the uh, COVID relief bill is going to small businesses, and I think that's interesting. I think it's very important that they're doing this, as I don't believe small businesses got a ton of help during the first 7 months of this pandemic. So, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
When it comes to things like small business support, I think that's probably one of the more important things. Like, of course, whether or not a family can get by is important, but um, other than that, I think that's probably the biggest thing for this bill, just simply because the small businesses really are what makes, um, well, the United States, kind of just like the dream, I guess. And I would be kind of upset if there wasn't any support given to small businesses simply because it's just unfair.
Mhm.
Um, Especially during a pandemic where, at least in my opinion, the government is really to blame for a lot of the just dog shit policy and why this is still lasting as long as it is.
Mhm.
And so if small businesses weren't helped, but they were directly affected by the lack of government, then, you know, that'd be kind of scummy.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Aid for small businesses is huge at a time like this.
mhm.
Uh, I mean, the first COVID stimulus package, uh, a lot of the funds in that one went to some larger businesses, which really is not what is needed in the slightest at this point. Big business has the ability and funds to stay open. They will not have, they will not and have not had a problem getting through this pandemic.
Mhm.
And giving funds to small businesses is really another great way to keep the economy stimulated because small business owners are, especially during this pandemic, are very strapped for cash, and any money that they do get will immediately be put back into the economy for rent, for utilities, for stock. Uh, Not only will this help those businesses, but it will keep the economy stimulated. And the specific number of 284 billion, um, I'm not sure what context to put that number in, how many small businesses are getting it, what's the money per small business. Um, but certainly, if it is substantial for each business that it goes to, then uh, I could see myself applauding the government for this part of the bill.
Yeah. So what I couldn't find anything specifically on where all that money is going, but I do know the vast majority of it is going to kind of the loan system to help businesses like get loans to pay rent, get loans to just basically survive for a little bit. And I think it was in the range of like 80 to 90 billion is going directly into the the paycheck protection, so that when certain employees and businesses get COVID, they can actually just pay that person's paycheck and paid time off while they have COVID. So it helps small businesses ensure they can pay their uh, their employees while they are sick, and I believe it also applies to if a business isn't making enough money to pay the paycheck, even if they are still, even if all their employees are still working. I believe it can also be extended to help uh, those businesses pay their employees what they need to be paid. So very, very good job by Congress, I would say, in having a very large portion of that of our COVID relief money going to small businesses. And also in that small business help, there's a little thing down here. Child care centers, they're putting 10 billion down to help child care centers reopen safely, which will be really interesting. So they're trying to help not necessarily one of like our biggest actors in when it comes to helping with COVID, but just a part of the economy and part of life that does help parents do other things that have to do with stimulating the economy and just working. So I think that'll be good. It's not necessarily the most important thing in the world, but is something that is important to mention. They are also helping out with that specifically. And I did just go back and do some quick math to figure out how much the government's going to be spending on those unemployment benefits. So it was looking like I believe 20.1 million Americans right now are on unemployment, and the plan is $300 a week for. I just put down 12 weeks. It might be longer. I believe it was like 7 or 12, as I said. But assuming it's the 12-week marker, it's just over 74 billion going into unemployment, which I think is pretty reasonable. We definitely could spend more on the unemployment benefits. We're actually spending less than we are on the stimulus package, which I thought was interesting. But it's a good amount of money. Again, we could do more, but it does get to a certain point where we don't want unemployment to be paying more than like our minimum wage, and that's a whole nother conversation. But we just want to make sure everyone's being taken care of right now and able to survive through the pandemic. So I think that the three
Do
hundred
you just
dollars.
automatically get the 300, or do you have to apply for it?
So that's if you're on unemployment. You have to apply for unemployment and prove that you're looking for
Right.
work, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously do all the normal unemployment things. But if you are on the unemployment, you'll be getting $300 a week, and
Okay.
it's actually like again, it's not even 10% of our relief package, which is pretty interesting. It doesn't cost that like it costs billions, but in comparison to
Relatively.
the overall size of the bill, we actually aren't spending a ton on the unemployment side of things. It's definitely
Mm-hmm.
going to some other stuff, and again, I think it's a good amount, and I definitely think that in most places, bar like California and some other states, $300 is going to be enough to at least live and get by during these times. So I think although like the stimulus could be bigger and we could pay people a bit more money in certain areas that have like higher cost of living, I think the government has done actually a pretty decent job at ensuring people won't be like dying of starvation and other things during the pandemic. So,
I mean, I do think that the government could be doing a lot better. They could have been doing a lot better throughout this entire
oh yeah,
pandemic and somewhat economic downturn. Um, there is, I think, one of the most important things with this pandemic is coming out the other side different from how we came in, finding ways to improve everything, every process in the government, every uh, way of uh, dealing with unemployment and social benefits, transportation, all of this. It's important to take what we learned from this and come out the other side better,
mm,
because going back to the system we had before after this pandemic is just setting us up to fail at the next sign of disaster.
yeah,
and and finding those ways to change the process, to change what benefits people have, what they are able to still be able to participate in when another one of these things comes up, is going to be perhaps the most important thing that we get out of this.
yeah, for sure. I think that for a lot of Americans, this pandemic was kind of a slap in the face, and I think most people would agree that we do definitely have to, if not like just change, like drastically improve and possibly increase funding quite a bit to a kind of our emergency situations budget. Like we need to be more prepared. We need to know exactly what we're going to do, and we need to have a plan in place before this kind of thing happens. Because I believe like under Obama, he did create a plan, and it was thrown out by Trump. But I don't think it would have been as thorough as we needed it to be in any case. So I think we just need
It
to.
was a pandemic response team,
Okay.
not just a plan, but like a team of workers,
Okay.
which we can't say one way or the other
Yeah.
how they would have responded,
Hmm.
but I do think it was very poor decision by the Trump administration to uh, uh, get rid of the response team.
Yeah, I definitely think that whether or not it was a good plan or had much in it at all. Like bottom line, it was the only thing we had, and it did get thrown out. I do think that that was fairly dumb of the Trump administration. We didn't we went from having at least something to having no idea what we were going to do, and that caused delays in our congressional system passing certain things and deciding what we're going to do, and it just caused things to take a lot longer than they needed to in a situation where speed would have made a big difference. I mean, we saw New Zealand the other day, not the other day, but a couple weeks ago, completely open back up. No masks needed or anything. People can walk in public. Their country is running perfectly fine because they responded quickly. Obviously, it's hard to discern if we were ever going to be able to do something like that because they have a very small population compared to ours, so it's much easier to control. But it does go to show what a quick reaction can do for a country. They are back fully functional and without any issues anymore. So, definitely in retrospect, what happened during this pandemic was extremely poor. We just did not have the reaction time we needed. We did not have the reaction we needed. And I think that looking at that retrospect, we can come together and say, hey, we need to have a plan for this kind of thing in the future because we know this stuff happens every few hundred years and oftentimes more often than that. So it'd be a very good idea to invest at least some money into having a plan and knowing exactly what we're going to do the next time this kind of thing happens, whether that be a pandemic or some other kind of worldwide trauma that goes on. All right, so you guys have anything else to say about the small businesses or individual COVID relief stuff?
No, not really, honestly.
All right, so something that I thought was pretty interesting that I didn't think about at all, and I'm sure not many people did, was the government invested 7 billion into helping people afford internet costs and afford landlines, that kind of stuff, to ensure that people working from home and people getting schooled from home would actually be able to be schooled from home. I had no idea they were putting this into the bill, and I think it's a really good idea. Just help people adapt to the situation because there are several homes even in the more upper class area where I live, Monument. Um, there's just there were several people that don't have internet in their homes and they just don't have these the infrastructure to transition to this area. So I think it's very uh, good that the Senate decided to at least invest some money into helping people without internet and who can't afford internet be able to build that infrastructure and afford it. So that was pretty interesting. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that.
I
This is
wonder how they get that money, like how they're going to spend all the money, like whether or not it's just going to go to people or internet companies just to make it free, or yeah, who knows? I guess what their plan would be.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely could be executed in a good way or a bad way, but bottom line, it's good to see that the government's at least thinking about these kinds of things that I don't think many other people would have thought of at all, and
Mm.
at least acting on them a little bit. So, just cool implications that they really are like they thought a lot about this bill. It makes sense how it was written and the things they're including. So, just it's
the
kind of a relief, at least from my perspective, because I was hearing so much, bullshit about this bill and how horribly written it was and how it was so long and no one could read it. No, I genuinely think this is a well thought out bill, at least the COVID package. We'll get to the omnibus package later, but I think
the
this COVID
internet
package was good.
the internet part of this bill is just something that should have been done years ago. The internet is such a vital part of modern life. It it's something that's almost as important as uh, electricity at this point and functioning roads. Uh, Not every single person in the world in the U.S. will need it, but it is something that is almost required to participate in modern life, not only with you know school, work, but also signing up for government programs,
Mm.
finding aid in other places, and seeing as how uh, we were able to expand things like electricity and infrastructure and clean water to many rural areas decades ago. It's just internet access should have been something that we figured out long ago, but fortunately, uh, money is now at least being put into the bill, um, for now, because now more than ever is when people are going to need those extra resources to help them.
Yeah, for sure. It's like obviously, so like one of my core beliefs is equality of opportunity is probably the most important foundation for our capitalist society and kind of any economy in the world. Is it's very important to ensure every single person in this country has an equal opportunity at pretty much everything, and it's them who can then make decisions and change that opportunity and kind of mold it into whatever they want to make of it. But there have been some like pretty bad internet issues in our country's past couple of years, and obviously they're going to be solved as we get better technology and things go wireless and you don't need as much infrastructure to transmit an internet signal. But we're not quite there yet, and frankly, it's really good to see that we're finally going to allow for people who didn't have internet access or good internet access before to be allowed that opportunity, even if it's just a little bit of help from the government. It's good to see that we're investing in that finally. So, if we want to move on to transport stuff in the COVID bill, so this one was pretty interesting. $41 billion is going to be paid to airline workers, bus drivers, not taxi drivers, but train drivers, that kind of stuff. Just a bunch of public transportation, and I think that's probably pretty important because, as everybody knows, those industries have taken a massive hit. Great time to invest in airline companies and those kinds of things if you're looking for that kind of deal. But it's it's very scary, kind of the implications that might have moving forward. They're very big industries, especially the airline industry. I'm not sure if it's gonna take too much of a hit from this pandemic, but it definitely did need a bit of a boost, and it's really good to see that a lot of those workers are getting paid by the government to ensure they are going to be making a solid amount of income. Um, yep.
Yeah, I actually really like the idea of all this stuff here. It's like, um, especially following the things like stock market and stuff. It's actually like it's really like a lot of airlines like Virgin Airlines are like heading towards bankruptcy right now. So they like really need like, of course, huge corporate bailouts and stuff, but big corporations are like a huge part of our economy, uh, like an immense size. So it's like I think that especially with a lot of these airline companies, it's important to keep them afloat because after this is all said and done, we need them back. Really, like I don't know. I think that this is probably one of the better parts of the bill, in my opinion, just because of how important it is, especially because it's going to help us bounce back faster.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's what the majority of this bill is for. Obviously we have a big chunk of change going to the unemployment. We have the 20% of the money in this bill, 20% of that 9 billion going to the stimulus checks. But I do think that the stimulus checks and all this other stuff is more here to just help the economy kind of bounce back. Because as far as I can tell, we're pretty close to reopening stuff once vaccines get put out on the way. People are getting vaccinated now. Obviously slower than expected, but they're still getting vaccinated, and we're on the path to healing and opening things back up now. I think so. It's really really good to see all the stuff that's being pumped into the economy to just kind of give it that booster jump and propel us hopefully into a healthy economy so we can avoid any kind of a depression.
Hmm.
So
Bailouts for big corporations are always tough because you're balancing, the question of stability in the economy with you know, too big to fail. What really should we be giving big corporations when they don't provide a service that is sustainable, such as with the 2008 market crash. I do think, absolutely with the pandemic, it can't be traced back to business practices of specific corporations. It's a pandemic, it's affecting everyone. But I do think that if the bill is able to funnel that money more directly to the workers and to the infrastructure rather than just to companies, it it'll be uh, a lot better on all fronts than just a corporate bailout.
mhm,
Well, it's kind of like when it comes to, well, because a huge part of this bill is simply the economy. And when it comes to stuff like that, let's just use Amazon as an example. Let's say Amazon was struggling big time because of COVID, which it's obviously not the case. They're doing better than they ever have. But just in this fantasy world, right? If Amazon was like about to fail and the government didn't bail them out, then that could have huge repercussions on our economy. So it's kind of just like a necessary evil, really, of um, really how capitalism in our society works. If we didn't do bailouts in 2008, then the recession would have lasted a lot longer than it did, with things like saving the banks that caused the recession. It sucks, but it's just something that has to be done, or our economy just wouldn't be where it is today.
yeah, when it comes to bailouts, the way I kind of see it is like you don't want to give money to the things that caused the problem to begin with, but it's also kind of a matter of we need to, and then we can kind of fix that problem later when things are better, right? So right now it's more just like a we need to get the economy rolling again, or things are going to get a lot worse. And right now we don't have. It doesn't matter where the money's going. We just got to make sure that money's going to the thing that will help the economy bounce back the fastest, and that's going to be in some situations those big corporate bailouts that have to happen and later on the line we can go and we can make laws and regulations that ensure that that were made don't happen again. And I think in this case, it's not necessarily any corporation's fault. I think it's more just our government was really, really slow to set out regulations for the pandemic, and I think that's what caused this issue mainly. So I
It
think that the fix is going to be just having a plan later down the line for this kind of situation.
Bailouts really, they don't have to be a necessary evil if the bailouts are done in a fashion that benefits the workers and uh, perhaps goes more into the running of the company versus many bailouts in the past have uh, gone to higher executives and
Mm-hmm.
CEOs. And one of the problems with the 2008 not pandemic recession was the failure to hold those executives accountable, which really isn't a problem here in the pandemic, but there is certainly opportunities during this pandemic to recognize how some mainly billionaires, CEOs are uh, exploiting money and their companies in unethical ways. But that's something that can be discussed another time. We probably should continue going through the relief
Yeah,
package right now.
I just want to touch on that real quick. So I think that we probably can send out these bailouts in a certain way where maybe like the money has to be used to pay the workers. So what's going to happen is all the profits the companies made can just go directly to their profits, and the government will kind of pay the workers. So that company can still make a profit and essentially have their largest expense dealt with by the government. Something like that could be really interesting, where the government money is going pretty much directly into the pockets of the workers to ensure they get paid, and the company can allocate the rest of the funding that they made extra because of that bailout wherever needed. So I think there are ways we can kind of format these bailouts to make them better, but as a whole, you're still having, no matter which way you do it, a large sum of money that the corporation decides to spend in a certain way, and it's very difficult to kind of uh, force it to be spent in certain ways or not. So I think the best way is just kind of see them as a necessary evil, and later down the line just fix the problem that kind of caused unnecessary caused the necessity of a bailout because they shouldn't ever be necessary really. So if we want to continue, we have the just real quick to finish off the COVID bill. We have the 82 billion going to schools and universities to help them safely reopen. Again, it's more spending to just ensure the economy will be able to safely reopen, and in this case, it's for schools, and it's quite a large chunk of change they're throwing at schools, which is very good because it is one of our most important institutions to get back on its feet as quickly as possible. Because there are a lot of people who, as I assume, would empathize with my experience of seeing online schools being very ineffective, and we do want to get back to in-school systems as soon as possible. Again, at a safe time frame. We don't need to rush it because if we rush it, that's just going to cause more problems. But we do want to facilitate schools reopening as quickly as possible. It is and should be one of our top priorities as a country. And
I wonder, do you know if the it's for like public schools and community colleges, or is it also for private colleges as well?
it is so that 82 billion is specifically for public schools, and there is another. I think there's like 2.1 billion specifically for private schools. So the vast majority of that money is going to public schooling, which is very important. So great to see there. And yeah, anyone else have anything to say about the education stuff?
I mean, at least for me, it's pretty simple. I mean, it's just like agreeable, I guess. There's not really any downsides, honestly. Like,
Mhm.
more or less, I don't know. I think it's pretty good.
All right, so uh, something Trump actually was advocating to put into the bill, which is interesting because I find it quite agreeable and not very Republican, but an end to surprise medical billing. So that what a surprise medical billing is basically I need a surgery on my liver because I have severe liver disease, right? So I go into the hospital and I get my surgery, and I come back up and I'm now surprised with a $83,000 bill that I can't pay, right? So essentially what this has to do is they're saying that a hospital has to give you a accurate estimate of the amount of money you'll be paying for a procedure at least 3 days before the procedure happens. So obviously this can't happen for emergency situations, but for like a regular thing where say you need a kidney transplant, they have to give you an accurate estimate on that price before you have the procedure, so you can really weigh the cost and benefit of that. So a small change, but I think one that is generally good, and I don't have much quarrel with it. Again, I'm not sure how it is applied to emergency situations. I'm sure it doesn't actually get applied to those because some people just aren't conscious to be able to get it and won't live 3 days before procedures. So it'd be unreasonable in certain situations, but I'm sure it isn't actually applied there.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who is actively just constantly in the medical world with my condition, I had legal protection against surprise billing, but I think that it should have just not been a thing and it should have been phased out a long time ago because there are these families who just get completely crippled just because they can't pay these $100,000 surgery costs that they just weren't expecting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just unbelievably scummy. And I think that I'm glad that it got put in, but it should have been put in just a long time ago, really.
Yeah, it's kind of just like a common sense thing where all this surprise billing can be used for is really just to kind of take advantage of people. Like if you if you are misled about the price of a procedure, it is just scummy. Like there's no reason that should be illegal. It's almost like a like scam type of stuff. It's just completely immoral, and I'm glad they got rid of it.
It's an improvement, but it's really not the end all be all solution that a lot of Republicans push it as.
Yeah.
Many suggest that this is the solution to the healthcare problem is openness about pricing.
Hmm.
That is not the case. This is an improvement. I can't disagree with that, and I'm glad to see something
Hmm.
something better that the Trump administration has done. But it's really not what it's being hyped up to be, and it's really um, it at best it's a virtuous, albeit extremely small improvement,
Hmm.
but at worst it's a virtue signaling move that is is put into the bill just simply to try and claim that uh, a problem has been solved when really it's no closer to uh, eliminating the problem.
Yeah, like I can definitely see an argument that like a lot of Republicans would vote on this, just they don't have to vote on anything else like Medicare related in the future. But bottom line, we can't really predict whether or not that's going to happen, and I think for now we should just be happy that we are seeing improvements in some of the scummier parts of our medical system. So I'm happy to see it, and I will completely agree that it's not nearly enough to solve like the widespread issues we have with our medical system, but it is an improvement, and it's good to see that at the very least they're able to pass some kind of an improvement for our medical system in this bill. And then the last one I found kind of interesting. It is going to benefit some people in a pretty small way, but um, meals are now a tax deductible expense for businesses. So I think that's mainly going to help small businesses that are paying for employee meals and that kind of stuff. So that'll be a good kind of deduction for them. But I don't really see it mattering too much. I think this is just kind of something else that just got slipped in there because like you know more tax write-offs are going to be good when we're trying to help businesses out as much as possible right now and stimulate the economy. So
I
not
guess it
necessarily.
could also encourage businesses to give their employees food like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say you're working at the Red Lobster and you don't get employee meals at Red Lobster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe they're gonna start because it's a write-off, and
Yeah.
corporate, the corporate world loves tax write-offs. So
Yeah.
maybe I think it could lead to some really great changes. It's just whether or not
Yeah.
the businesses want to make those changes.
I don't think it's a huge deal. I don't think it's gonna like have tax income take like any kind of hit at all. I really don't see this being any kind of like a massive change. I think it's just probably just a small quality of life thing for some specific situations. And again, it's only a couple lines out of the several $1,000 bill, but it's just interesting to look at, see that they're thinking about that kind of thing. So that is everything involved in the COVID package. So that 900 billion total you've been hearing about is everything we just went over. So no foreign aid is included in that. No military spending is included in that. Nothing. Everything is going to the American people and American institutions that need help right now. That is where that 900 billion is going. Just to be very, very clear, it's a good bill, at least in my opinion. It could be better, but I think that it's a great, great bill, and I think it's going to do some good things for people and the economy in the near future. So, like overall, what are your guys' takes on the bill or on that package in the bill?
I think it's probably the best. Like it realistically, I think it's the best that our government could possibly do. Like because of how our systems operate, I think that some people, of course, want them to the government to give more. Um, I'm one of them. But at the same time, when people are discussing and debating what's on going to be on this bill, I think that this is probably the best um, that people would vote for.
Hmm.
I think that I think that overall it's a really excellent um, example of what a little bit of cooperation can do within our government, and just to imagine what it would be like if they weren't just a bunch of uh, I guess just people who don't really care, honestly. It's like, I don't know.
Hmm.
I think it's a pretty good bill overall. I wish it was a little more, but honestly, I can't complain.
Yeah. So if you want to go ahead, Jack.
I mean, it's definitely something. It's definitely going to uh, give some benefits. Uh, it's just there is certain areas that are pretty sorely lacking, especially in comparison to a lot of other countries'
Hmm.
stimulus and their response to the pandemic. I also think that it's an opportunity to kind of take a look at those in the government, see who is actually uh, pushing for uh, better stimulus for citizens. I believe that the $2,000 checks got passed by something like two-thirds of Congress,
Hmm.
um, which is a somewhat surprising amount, but it really, uh, can show you who is actually out there in Congress advocating for you as a citizen
Hmm.
instead of just for their own interests. Um, and I mean, not to get too partisan here, but I do think that Mitch McConnell is making a big mistake both as a politician and as uh, I guess a politician in government, but also a politician for the people, because he's just demonstrating how little he cares for both the citizens in this country, but also just for the democratic process.
Hmm.
Um, but overall, I don't think that it's too bad of a bill, and I do see some of the areas within the bill as very positive, particularly with some of the education, with the internet access parts of it.
Yeah, for sure. And just to touch on that McConnell thing again, like I think most people, whether you agree that the bill should be passed and the stimulus should be increased to 2,000 or not, I think that everyone can agree what he's doing here is stopping democracy. He's just halting the vote from taking place at all. I do believe that if the vote were to take place, it would be passed, and what he is doing is just, I'd say it's very undemocratic, and I'd hope that he does not get reelected because of the things he's done during the pandemic. But specifically for this reason, it's very very I would
I
argue just
mean,
immoral to do what he's doing.
he he just did get reelected, so
Ah, gotta
it's
love our
more.
country, man.
Good thing
Oh yeah,
re-election rates are like 95%.
Yeah, man. Don't need any changes. Not at all.
There's nothing wrong with our government.
Of
You can
course.
see this clearly by Mitch McConnell
Yes.
and, you know, career politicians. It's so nice.
Of course.
I love United States politics, but there is just so much bullshit. It's like it's kind of unbelievable how stupid it can be sometimes. Like I don't know. It's I used to like Mitch McConnell. I thought that he was a pretty good head of the Republican Party,
Hmm.
but really after this stopping the vote thing, it's kind of unbelievable what what he's doing. Um, I think that a lot of Americans agree as well. Like, of course, there's going to be a lot of people who are hard right who are just like, no, Mitch McConnell's doing great,
Hmm.
because they want this to pass. They don't want to pay more taxes and all that. But I really think that the majority of Americans really disagree with what's going on right now, and I hope that this is like or and I hope that it's represented in the next election cycle and that a lot of people get voted out because they
Mhm.
should.
To be fair, I also would like to criticize Nancy Pelosi's failure to advocate for $2,000 in the initial uh, pass of the bill. I mean, many career politicians, uh, not even regarding their side, are going to often fail to recognize what American citizens actually require, and will fail often to actually advocate for what their constituents uh, are desperately needing and wanting.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for sure. I personally really don't like career politicians. I think it's not really the greatest thing for our government. Sure, they're educated, but there are plenty of other people who just are like super educated that can't
Mhm.
get in just because there are people who are in office for 60 years.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. When it comes to Nancy Pelosi, like, there were the funny, like, there's like the funny quote where she's like, "Oh yeah, $600 is a significant amount for the American people," and it's like, obviously, she did not mean that like people could live off of $600 for 7 months, like what people were saying. She was saying basically like it's gonna be an amount essentially that we're able to pass because a lot of Republicans were kind of blocking the numbers. Obviously with Mr. McConnell, completely blocking the bill that is only touching on increasing the amount of money the American people will be getting. It's pretty easy to see what the Republicans' motives are when it comes to passing this kind of bill. And personally, I would say that it's not for the benefit of the American people as a whole. I would say they're blocking it for more self-interest type of deal. I'm not sure where that comes from, but it is fairly
That's kind
anti-American
of
people to
sad,
block it.
dog. Like, fuck. Like, I don't know. I I don't know about you guys, but especially with all the COVID stuff going on, I've just been extremely disappointed in our government as a whole, no matter
Mhm.
what side it is, both Republican, Democrat, and Independent. I don't know. I think that Pelosi, McConnell, it's all just completely embarrassing, and
Mhm.
I don't know what you guys think about it. I'm interested to hear your takes on whether or not you think that both sides are doing bad. One side's doing good, one side's not. Um, but personally, I just think it's all just terrible.
Yeah. So what my take on it is what I was saying earlier. We were just way too slow with this bill. It took way too long. It was very very dumb of the Trump administration to dump out the only plan we had for this situation. And uh, I do want to give props to kind of both parties to pass certain things faster than that usually would have. I guarantee a lot of politicians made some concessions for this COVID relief bill and the previous one as well. Um, Again, I'm sure it could have happened much, much faster, but I do want to applaud those who did make concessions in order to get things passed. Obviously, people like Mitch McConnell are not going to be the people you want to applaud, and sometimes they've said some dumb things like Nancy Pelosi, but I think overall it's happened faster than it would have in a void, but it definitely could have been, months faster, and we could have had a plan prepared before this kind of thing even happened. And I think this is going to be hopefully a wake up call to a lot of people to just kind of think about having a plan ready for any situation and just knowing exactly what our country is going to do. Just contingency plans is something we need to have for our country to ensure its safety in the future. And I think the major issue was that we didn't have one. And I think we would have been much more successful if we had an actual plan to begin with.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I don't know. Like, of course, the bill is nice, but I personally think it should have happened a lot faster, like a lot
Hmm.
faster. How long has it been since the last bill? How many months?
I believe
I think
7.
Yeah, like 7 months. Yeah, that's just, in my opinion, that's just not good enough. Like, this is
Hmm.
nice, of course. It's better than nothing,
Hmm.
but it's just, in my opinion, not good enough, as I said.
Yeah. I think again our response was lackluster and way too slow.
Hmm.
But I think because of how our legal system works and how we pass things, it does take a lot of time. I think the issue here is that we just didn't have a plan to begin with, and we kind of had to make a plan then enact the plan, vote on the plan. All these different things and different steps had to happen. And yes, it could, those things could have been done much faster. I completely agree, but um, I think the expectation should be that we just have a plan for this kind of thing in the future. I think it's just kind of brainless that we didn't have any kind of contingency plan. It's it should be a wake up call, hopefully, for people to just advocate for plans for certain things in the future, and people to start talking about them. Really, is also a big point. So,
Yeah, for sure.
all right, so I think that's good to wrap up for the COVID package stuff. So we can move on to the omnibus package. So, just for starters, to refresh people that maybe haven't been watching the entire thing, the omnibus package is going to be the federal spending plan for 2021, and that is 1.4 trillion. It's on the same bill as the COVID plan, but it's actually a separate chunk of money and completely separate intentions for than what the COVID package is. So we have 1.4 trillion going to the omnibus and 900 billion going to the COVID package. There are two separate amounts of money going to two separate things. So the biggest thing that I think we're probably going to spend a decent chunk of time talking about is going to be 696 billion going to our military for reasons. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, shoot, dog, you gotta. Okay, you know what? I'll just start it out, right? Like, so of course I'm gonna be a little bit biased, simply because I have a lot of family that's in the military. Um, but is this too much money? Personally, I do think it is, but at the same time, the military provides a lot of jobs, like a lot. And so I think that this isn't all bad when it comes to how much money we're spending, as a lot of military spending, of course, is development on new technology, but a lot of it is also just wages and infrastructure. Um, so I don't know. I'm curious to see what your guys' opinion is, but I just don't think it's that big of a deal, really, because we just always spend a lot of money on the military.
yeah. So just for kind of like a comparison, this year we're only spending 2.6 billion more than we did last year. So this is actually very similar. And if you account for inflation, we're actually spending less like value in money on the military than we did last year, which I found
Hmm.
pretty interesting. But I do think personally, just as a whole, we are spending way too much on military. I mean, even just with the idea of mutually assured destruction with several countries that prevents any kind of conflict from happening when it comes to use of force, we could definitely cut down on the amount of money we pump into the military, especially as we get more technology and better technology for the military. We really don't have to spend as much on the infrastructure, and I do agree it does create a lot of jobs, like a lot of jobs for our country, but we could put those into other programs that also create a lot of jobs. So I think we just spend way too much, and even if we were to cut like the military budget in half, we'd still have the vast majority of the infrastructure, and they'd just be more incentivized to pump more money into research and development to create cheaper and more efficient options for what they currently do, rather than just asking for a new fleet of battleships every year.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so interesting. Overall, I think last year, no, in 2018, um, 23% of military spending was on wages.
Mm,
So that's a lot. That's a lot lower than I thought it was. But I don't know. I personally think that we should get out of like the Middle East and stuff and try to do more of a, the United States isn't in charge of the whole world's, you know, well, they're not like the world's parents.
yeah,
Of course, isolationism, in my opinion, is impossible in the modern world, just because we're connected and I can text somebody on the other side of the planet for, in like a second, right?
yeah,
And so it's like I don't think that's possible. I just think that we should have less of a presence and try to stop spending as much.
hmm,
Try to retain the jobs and stuff, but maybe try to work more efficiently when it comes to development and just exactly how much money certain programs get.
yeah. It's just like even like 5% of our military budget. I'm not sure five, maybe like 10% would be more accurate, but like 5% of our military budget is still more money than like literally any other program in our country gets yearly. It's kind of crazy the amount of money we put into the military, and as you can tell, like we aren't having any wars right now besides like the war on drugs, which our military isn't necessarily involved in.
I
And
mean, we're still militarily involved in the Middle East.
Yeah,
yeah,
are we
but
still participating
yeah,
like slightly into the war against terror? Or is that over at this point?
yes,
But
but the amount of money that we're actually spending on that is, very, very small compared to the money we're spending on other things in the military. I think it's very reasonable to uh, cut the military funding by a lot and redistribute
yeah,
that spending to other places. I think that it's kind of the best course of action for us right now. The more we develop technology for our military, and the more the world gets developed, I do believe we'll start to become less aggressive toward each other, like as countries and units, and we'll have to spend less on military as time goes on. And I think it's time we start decreasing our spending rather than increasing it every year. We really
yeah.
aren't seeing much
The
utility come out of the military.
the military is just such a big money sink for the U.S. We spend more on military than the next 10 countries combined. It's just absurd.
Hmm.
We do not need to be spending this much on the military at all. And, you know, the military may provide jobs, it may have some R&D, but ultimately that money would be a lot more efficiently spent in other areas.
Hmm.
Job creation and research and development with other sectors of the economy and other government programs. I mean, particularly, I think research and development can be handled a lot more by places like the health department or NASA
Hmm.
rather than the military. And
Mm.
really, the only time the military shines in research and development is on large scale global wars, which we really should probably try to be avoiding
Yeah.
at this point in time.
And like again, the question I would pose is for a large scale global war, we kind of have mutually assured destruction right now. I'm not sure that any kind of like if we were to somehow get into a war to begin with, it would have any kind of resolution that didn't involve the world ending. So,
Right.
Yeah, it's just that's not really possible. So I don't
mhm,
know. I personally I would really wish that all this military spending. Imagine what, and I'm not saying we should pay this much towards them, but imagine what NASA could do with even just a small percentage of this.
mhm,
Like for real, bro. Like we need to. I don't know. It's kind of embarrassing when like private companies are doing better than 60-year-old companies that the government's been funding, like NASA versus SpaceX.
yeah,
Like SpaceX is just destroying NASA right now when it comes to Edge in going to Mars because
mhm,
they're both working on it. And so I don't know. I kind of wish that we spent a little more on development, but at the same time, when it comes to things like space, is it really? It's probably honestly better for private companies to do it because they're much more concerned about their margins than government stuff is because they can just get more money. Really,
mhm.
I think SpaceX is probably going to end up doing it more efficiently in the long run. But yeah, so what do you guys think military spending should be, if any at all? Like, of course we need military, right?
Yeah.
But what do you guys think would be a better number than 696 billion?
Well, what I would do is I would probably keep the like people in the military the same. Still have people enlist voluntarily and that kind of stuff. I don't think there's any necessity for a draft anymore. We have so many people in the military voluntarily right now. It's just not necessary. We still should be able to do that. Maybe we kind of increase the amount of intelligence or education you need to be able to get into the military to ensure that they're going to be able to be better trained and more intelligent people. Obviously, that'd be very slightly. It's more just like, cut kind of the bottom couple percent of people off and just ensure that we're going to have a well trained, smart military backup. And as you said, that's like 23% of the budget goes to paying those people. And then what we can do is we can essentially just keep this stuff we have now, maintain it with some money, and then pump a bunch of money into R&D. I think that if we're talking about like a military security on the planet, Right now, we're providing that for a bunch of other countries, and I think it's about time we expect them to pay for their own military to begin with, and
Mm,
that will allow us to decrease military funding because we won't have to have the firepower to protect them as well as us. But we also should just in general spend a lot more on research and development. I think the best strategy for uh, military conflicts is going to be just to have the more advanced and superior firepower. And right now, we spend way too much on getting a new fleet of battleships instead of researching a new kind of battleship. Right? I'd much rather see money go into the research than just straight up more machines that we're probably never going to use before they rust over and are become useless. So.
We could easily half our military budget and still be in a commanding lead in the
Mhm.
world. Looking at China, the second highest spender on military, half of our military budget is still nearly 100 billion more than their entire military budget.
Mhm.
And so I think really a good place to start would be by at least halving our military budget,
Yeah.
because that amount of money funneled into healthcare, job
mm-hmm.
creation, infrastructure, education could provide way more benefits to the country and the citizens,
Mhm.
and it would start to show that America, the United States, is the wealthiest country. It is the best place to live, which we are just horribly failing at the moment on many different fronts.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons for that is because we put such a focus on military in our national budget.
Yeah, I don't think anyone here is advocating for like draining all the military spending out. Like I'm still okay with us having the strongest military in the world, and hell, I think it might even be a good thing right now. While there's still a lot of tension in the Middle East and a lot of tension with North Korea and China, I think it is important for us to have the strongest military force in the world. But right now, we can have that and spend probably just a quarter of what we're spending on the military now, and be able to maintain that lead. Not to mention, uh, diversifying that spending more to benefit research and development over just building more tanks and building more uh, battleships and putting into more useless stuff that probably won't ever get used. If we just reallocate some of that money and then cut it, I think that we could even have a stronger military than we do now if we just spend money smarter and have a lot more left over to spend on other things in our country because it is kind of ludicrous the amount we've spent on the military in the past few years. In our entire history, really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Something interesting for military workers, they're in the Omnibus bill, there's a 3% raise for those workers. So that's actually higher than the average inflation rate. So military workers this year are actually getting a close to like 1.5% raise. So nothing huge, but it's going to ensure that they all get paid just over that inflation rate.
I
So
mean, yeah, that's I don't know. I think that if you're in the military, you should be paid pretty well. I mean, it just makes sense to me.
mhm.
You know, so I
I
don't know. I think it's a pretty good thing.
Yeah, I would agree completely. And just along the side with that, 3% increase for military workers, we are getting a 1% increase for civilian federal workers as well. Um, I believe 1% is just below the average rate of inflation for the country right now, and they're getting paid less value than they were last year, but it's very close to the same. So it's not necessarily a raise; it's more just keeping up with inflation, which should be happening with all workers. But that's a conversation for another time.
Um, Really quick, I don't want to branch off into another discussion. This is just a quick question.
Yeah.
Um, when Joe Biden gets elected, he was saying he wanted to do what, $12 minimum wage? Was that it? 15?
I think he's pushing for 15, but he might be going for like a 12 because it's much more realistic.
Yeah. So would he realistically be able to get that passed?
I think it's going to
And
kind of be like a Trump wall thing, where it's pretty populist for his side of the aisle, and a lot of Democrats and a lot of leftists would love to see a $15 minimum wage, and a lot of Republicans are going to be scared about it. So I think it's more just going to be something he goes for. If he can get a majority in the House and Senate, which I believe, I know he has at least a majority in the Senate, right? I'm not sure about the House, but a
Hmm.
very close majority in both. And I do think that if they are going to end up putting a bill through, they probably could get it passed realistically. I'm just not sure it'll actually happen, and it might be filibustered, much like what's happening with the current $2,000 bill. So I kind of
Yeah.
doubt he'll be able to make it happen, but I'm not necessarily sure it'd be bad for the country if it did, at least in the ways
Bro,
people are making it out to be.
bro. I don't know. I really think we need a higher minimum wage.
We
Like,
definitely do. At the very least, like, I think everyone can agree we should adjust it based off of inflation. Like, that's just kind of a
exactly.
no-brainer, right?
Yes.
So
It's
that,
just like
yeah.
the a big argument against it is that small businesses can't afford to pay it. So maybe we could add like some kind of government program that kind of assists small businesses for a little bit while they're getting used to it or something. I don't know, but
Well, I think that like the reason why that's assumed is because you're assuming small businesses' prices on items are going to remain the same, where they should adjust their prices to inflation as well. It shouldn't just be people get paid more while things cost the same. Everything that it essentially what inflation is the value of the dollar goes down. So when inflation happens, the price tag on everything, whether that be labor or whether that be food, whether that be leisure products, should increase at about the same rate just to stay consistent. So they are worth the same value because that's all inflation means. Is it means the value of the dollar is down by 1%
mhm,
every year, or a bit more than 1%. So all we
yeah,
have to do is adjust all the price tags in our country every year at that rate, and we can stay exactly the same we are now. It's just the numbers are going to be a bit higher, but everything's value is still going to be the same.
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's it's kind of just like the jump between what is it now? $7 and like
25 cents.
Yeah.
yeah, so 7.25 to whatever it would be a huge expense, especially for small businesses. Like you're never gonna Walmart will never struggle with a $15 minimum, right?
Yeah.
But small businesses who are struggling just to stay competitive, because they don't have those kind of profit margins that these bigger companies do. That's
Hmm.
the biggest concern when it comes to whether or not they should increase the minimum wage. So I'm curious to see if the government can think of anything that can kind of relieve small businesses and keep them competitive, because it's hard enough to compete against um, somebody like Walmart because they just have so much more. They can sustain small or lower prices
Yeah.
for consumer goods than a mom and pop could ever.
Yeah.
And so I'm really curious to see how the government because realistically the minimum wage will probably get increased pretty soon here, hopefully at least,
Hmm.
just because $7 it's been the same for years and years now. So
Yeah. It needs to increase. Like,
mhm,
I think that one thing they could do, just theoretically, is like when you're increasing the minimum wage, what essentially happens is all those minimum wage workers now can go and spend that money, right? So small businesses are going to also be making more money at the same time. They'd be paying their employees more. So what I think that kind of the best course of action would be is maybe for like a couple of years after the minimum wage takes its first jump, and then we start adjusting it based off of inflation. For that first initial jump, we can give them some subsidies to make sure they can make it through the first few years of impact. But after that, I think that generally they should be able to survive by just increasing their prices a bit, as most other places would be increasing their prices as well. I think that's just naturally how the flow of the economy works because, again, it's a matter of inflation, right? It's just the value of the dollar decreasing, so everything's going to go up in price, including Walmart's prices, including McDonald's prices by a little bit, and including everyone's wages and the amount they can spend in the economy. So I think there is going to be a period where they do need subsidies to make sure they can make it through, kind of like the bouncy up and down period of the economy fluctuating. But after that period, I do think that they shouldn't struggle to survive with an increased minimum wage because it's just the value of the dollar changing. It doesn't affect much else.
mhm, yeah, okay. If you want to say anything on that, Jack, go ahead.
I think it makes sense to increase wages for government workers,
Mm.
especially considering inflation.
Yeah.
But I I do think that the next part of this bill is very interesting.
Hmm. For sure. So, the next part of the bill is going to be the Office of Personal Management is asking or it's being asked by the government to do an analysis on how much or how many workers will be needed for artificial intelligence in government agencies in the near future. So, the government's looking into implementing artificial intelligence into some of their programs and systems, which obviously in the next year or so it probably won't be implemented much, but it's really, really interesting for the next couple of years that they're looking to improve their technology with artificial intelligence.
That's such a terrible idea, but it's like it's such a bad idea, but AI is the future. You can't run from it anymore. It's like they could implement it now and just do pretty good,
So
but that doesn't. It's like it's I don't know. AI to me is like extremely scary. So it's like, oh yes,
yeah,
put it
I
into the
mean,
government.
it gets a bad rep because you know like Terminator and shit, but when it really comes down to it, most people hear AI and they think like, oh yeah, Skynet, it's gonna be completely self-aware and it's gonna do this, this, and this, and it's gonna like be self-motivated and stuff. Like, no, when we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're really talking about machine learning, and that's just the capability for a computer to recognize patterns and adjust its code to
Yeah,
match the patterns essentially and find the best fit uh, for a pattern. So really, what it'll help with is it'll help balance probably spending. It'll help balance certain government systems, like maybe it'll increase the speed of our background check system for criminals. Say like it's able to go through and recognize names faster because it has a new, more effective way of of searching through names and searching through the database because of machine learning. It
yeah.
really has nothing to do with like an artificial intelligence overlord that's going to do all this stuff. This is mainly
No,
just
I
there
know. It's
to
just like
increase the efficiency of some smaller systems, but I think it's really cool to see the government stepping into some newer technology that could really be beneficial.
absolutely. I'm really curious because I bet that's really scary for a lot of people. Like, for
Hmm.
example, my dad won't get affected by this, but he works for Raytheon, and they're a they're a contractor for the military,
Hmm.
and but like so if my dad didn't work for Raytheon and he was rather somebody who was more into management on the government side, you know, things like artificial intelligence can and will absolutely make his job obsolete. I don't think that there are going to be people who are balancing budgets um, when AI can do it. That's I think what he does.
Well,
He makes sure like wages are fine, and
yeah.
AI could do it like way more efficiently. So I'm curious to see what implementation of AI and to see how thoroughly they're going to implement it and what that's going to do to job count in the government.
Well,
That
so
that's that's a concern certainly, but it'll happen whether or not the government does it
Oh,
because the
absolutely.
private sector, is always advancing.
yeah.
And so I think the question more so is, would you prefer a private company to develop that technology with the prime motive of profit, or would you rather the government be in the business of developing that technology? And while it will perhaps maybe not be as efficient in the development period, it would definitely not be as directly motivated by profit and would potentially be more helpful due to the fact that it is developed by for the expressed purpose of bettering human life rather than profit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a really great thing that the government is doing this. As I said, it's just scary, but also, you know, things like AI machine learning, you know, in the private sector, that's been worked on for like, you know, years and years at this point. It's kind of like whether or not the motivation for profit or utility kind of thing.
Hmm.
It's like when the government implements it, it's like and will possibly let the American people also use said technologies. It's definitely not a bad thing, but also saying that, you know, people like IBM who are like extremely advanced in AI technology right now, they are still going to be extremely advanced. They're probably leagues ahead of the government right now.
Yeah. Like what I think personally the best option for the artificial intelligence development is going to be allow both the private sector and the government to make use of it
Hmm.
for their different kind of motives and their different needs. because they do have two very different needs. The private sector is obviously going to look for the best, most efficient way to use artificial intelligence, whereas the government's going to have it suit some kind of utilitarian need in the government. And I think both of those are going to be okay. I don't think. Well, obviously, we need to restrict it to ensure certain bad things don't happen, but it should be pretty free on both ends. I don't see any kind of like bad thing for the nation happening from development of artificial intelligence. But
Mm,
back to get to that kind of like the talking about losing jobs and that kind of stuff. I don't think there's much justification to be worried about jobs being gone permanently because essentially like what that argument revolves around is yeah, this AI will be able to replace some jobs. Like obviously someone calculating a budget, right? That person might lose that job, but what you're discounting is the fact that it's going to create other jobs. And in our entire time of developing technology and the economy growing and that kind of stuff throughout the entire world, there have always been scares of certain new machines that are going to remove jobs, like a cotton gin, right? People are people are going to lose their job picking the seeds out of cotton, right? Because this is a new automated machine, and people were worried about that back then. People still found jobs. It's never been a worry in the past that automation would cause an overall decrease in jobs in the economy. It tends to actually increase the amount of jobs in the economy over time. I think that obviously there are some people who are rationally scared about losing their jobs because that specific job they work now, yes, might be replaced, but they can always adapt and learn how to do something new and work somewhere else, right? Um,
I I must make it known that I'm running somewhat low on time. So if we want to maybe speed run through the next few,
for sure.
I have about 10 more minutes to spare.
All right, so I think we got past most of the interesting stuff anyway. So, increased the Department of Health's budget by 2.1 billion. So that's on top of the amount they were spending last year. I couldn't find that number. I didn't have much time, but we are increasing the amount of spending on the health department for obvious COVID-related reasons, among other things. So it's always good to see the government uh, increase spending
I
there.
appreciate that part of the bill.
hmm We have 13.5 billion for the U.S. Treasury. That's 500 million over the previous year's amount. I'm not really sure personally what goes into the Treasury. I should probably look into that a bit more, but I'm not sure that matters too much. We're increasing that spending. I'm not sure it needs to be increased, but it's happening. Uh, the IRS is getting an extra $400 million this year over what they got last year, and this is just an overall increase in funding. That extra 400 million isn't going to anything specifically. It's going to be spread across its four main branches and going to fund different things to help out people and to help detection of people trying to avoid taxes. Um, the last interesting thing that I can actually really appreciate is the VA is going to be getting 90 billion to provide health care for the 7.1 million veterans insured by them right now. It's about $12,000 per veteran on average, which is a good amount of money. I think that's it could be more, but I genuinely feel like that's a very good amount of money for healthcare for the Veterans Association right now. And they put another 94 billion away for next year on top of what they're going to be spending on it next year. So they're putting a lot of money into the Veterans Association, so I can appreciate that a lot. I think most people want to support our veterans, and I think it's a very good thing to see our government putting down a big chunk of change for them.
yeah, I mean, it's it's really nice to see because overall, at least in my opinion, the way that veterans have been treated in this country is like completely embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people out here who are just like they go into the military, they get honorably discharged, but they have PTSD and their life is ruined, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see some changes like this, and I'm excited to see what is going to happen in the future and to see if this is really actually going to help people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, veteran care is something that's often overlooked by even those who will occasionally advocate for it. And so, I mean, I'm always happy to see better healthcare uh, implemented somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and if and it's even better that if that's used for veterans, for those who have uh, uh, been disabled, uh, uh, been given mental illness from serving uh, it really is the duty of the government to fund their health care and
Mm.
to fund their recovery and uh, help them, actually participate in society and the economy again.
Yeah. I think most people will agree that it is kind of sad the way our veterans have been treated. I mean, you see a lot of veterans end up going homeless and just suffering a lot of even just financial uh fi- just bad finance stuff. You see a lot of them end up with PTSD and a lot of untreated psychological conditions, and it's always going to be good to see their situation getting better because they are the true people in this country who are fighting for freedom every day of their life and had done it for a very long time. So it's very very important that we help those people out as much as possible. So
Mm-hmm.
um, on that note, overall for the entirety of both the COVID and omnibus bill packages, what are your thoughts on the overall passing of it?
I think a lot of my thoughts I laid out earlier with how it could have done the COVID package could have done a lot more, but it's something. It's
Yeah.
an improvement. Uh, as for the omnibus package, a lot of it is pretty standard for the government. There's some areas of it that I'm glad to see, like the Department of Health and the VA.
Mm-hmm.
But other parts of it, I'm just as disappointed as ever with the government continuing to spend billions upon billions on the military
Mm-hmm.
uh, and really not seeing any substantial improvements in a lot of areas. And
Yeah.
that's something that maybe if some type of uh, depending a lot on the Georgia runoff elections 2 days from now, we'll see if there's more gridlock in the government.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even if you aren't a Democrat, you should be uh, at least excited in some way to see a party gain control, to just see what can get done, what will be passed. And of course, there's always another election coming up.
Mm-hmm.
If the Democrats do gain control and they just absolutely fail, uh, the Republicans will have another chance to gain back control. But
Mm.
personally, I'm really excited to see if out of you know the gridlock that's been apparent for the last 8 years since Obama's second term, if something, uh, if some great number of bills can be passed that will in some way change the government, the economy, so that we're not stuck in this just turmoil of, oh, well, I guess we can kind of agree on that, and then half-ass bill just getting pushed out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think bottom line, like uh, this bill, obviously it could have been better written, and there's some things that definitely don't need to be there. There's some things that needed to be there that we didn't see. But bottom line, I think that it's better than it could have been, but definitely it could have been better. It's not necessarily like an amazing bill. I'm very happy with the COVID side of things. The omnibus is about what you'd expect out of our country. A bit extra money going into it this year. Um, Nothing special. Obviously, still spending way too much on the military. Again, very happy with the Veterans Administration things. Very interested on the artificial intelligence stuff they're doing. But overall, just another regular year in the United States. You're not going to see anything too different. There's no reason to be outraged or anything unless you've been outraged for every omnibus bill in the past, 20, 30 years. There's genuinely not much change happening now, and that's not necessarily a good thing, but bottom line, no need to be outraged, like a lot of people were about this about this bill, and especially when it comes to touching on what Jack was saying about a party taking control. Whether you are Democrat or Republican, all we can hope is that the things get passed in the next 4 years are going to be genuinely good for our country. And I know for me, I do disagree with some of the things the Democratic Party wants to do, but if what they do does in fact help the country, I will gladly change my mind, and I will gladly admit I was wrong and advocate for it in the future. So I hope most people are that way as well.
Yeah, I think it's always kind of silly when people hope for politicians and stuff to fail. Like,
Mhm.
um, while I didn't vote for Biden, um, I absolutely want him to do the best job possible.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see what he's going to do, and I'm rooting for him. I wish that more people had that kind of mentality, but hey, you know what? That's what makes America America, I guess.
Gotta get it everyone else's throat before they can get at yours.
Yeah, basically.
All right. I think on that note, I'm gonna go ahead and end it off. If you have anything you want to say, drop it down in the comment section below. I'd love to respond to everything you guys say. If you have a recommendation for the next topic, go ahead and leave that down there as well. And thanks for watching.
Thank you.